When Hollywood legend Tom Cruise receives a deeply personal call from Burkina Faso's leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, emotions run high. This rare and touching exchange sheds light on an unexpected bond between two very different worlds. What was said on that call that moved Cruise to tears? It was a quiet Monday night in Los Angeles. Tom Cruise was sitting in his study, flipping through an old photo album. His phone buzzed, but the number on the screen was unfamiliar, foreign. He almost ignored it until something inside told him to answer. "Hello." Tom's voice was calm. The other end, a deep, steady voice said, "Mr. Cruise, this is Captain Ibrahim Traoré, President of the Transition of Burkina Faso." Tom sat up confused. He had never spoken to Traoré before. The president's tone wasn't political. It was personal, almost heavy. "I'm calling you, not as a leader, but as a man," Traoré continued. "There is something I must tell you, something only you can understand." In that moment, Tom felt his heart race. Why him? Why now? The president's next words made Tom freeze completely. "I've just learned something about your late father and how it connects to my country." The room felt smaller. Tom gripped the phone. Tighter. He didn't know it yet, but the next 6 days would change his life forever. The silence after Traoré's statement felt endless. Tom's mind raced back to his father, Thomas Matthey, a complicated man with a quiet past. They hadn't spoken much. Before his death? "What do you mean?" Tom finally asked, his voice sharper than he intended. Traoré's tone softened. "Before I explain, I need you to listen without judgment. This is not about politics. It's about truth and dignity." Tom took a deep breath. "I'm listening," Traoré began, telling him about a small village in northern Burkina Faso. Decades ago, an American man had arrived there, a man who bore Tom's last name. He worked quietly, helping farmers, building wells. But then something happened, something that had been hidden for years. Tom felt a lump in his throat. Was his father that man? Traoré didn't finish the story. Instead, he said, "I can't tell you everything over the phone, but I believe this truth will honor both our families. Will you let me call again tomorrow?" Tom hesitated, then whispered, "Yes." As the line disconnected, Tom stared at the darkness outside his window, wondering why his hands were shaking. That night, Tom didn't sleep. Every sound in his house seemed louder, every minute slower. His father's face kept flashing in his mind, stern, distant, unreadable. Could he really have had a secret connection to Burkina Faso? By morning, Tom had tried searching online, but nothing matched Traoré's story. No articles, no photos, no history. It was like a ghost had walked through his life without leaving footprints. At exactly 9 a.m. Los Angeles time, his phone rang. Again the same number. Tom Traoré began. "What I am about to tell you will not be easy to hear, but I believe you will want to know it." Tom's heart pounded. "Go on." Traoré spoke slowly, his words carrying weight. "Years ago, during a drought that threatened my people, your father was there. He gave everything he had, and something he never told anyone, something that cost him dearly." Tom gripped the phone, his eyes welling up. "What did it cost him?" Traoré paused for a long moment, then said, "It cost him the one thing he valued more than life itself." Tom felt the first tear roll down his cheek, and he knew this was only the beginning. Tom sat at the edge of his couch, phone pressed against his ear. Traoré's words hung in the air. The one thing he valued more than life itself. "What does that mean?" Tom asked, his voice trembling. Traoré didn't rush. "There are stories in my country about a man who came from far away who worked with his bare hands to save strangers. They say he carried a photograph everywhere of a small boy, his son. He never stopped talking about how proud he was of him." Tom's breath caught. Was it possible? His father had been a distant man, yet somewhere far away he spoke of pride. "But there's more," Traoré continued. "During the drought, he made a choice no one could forget. That choice is why I had to call you." Before Tom could press further, the line crackled. "Tomorrow," Traoré said firmly, "we will speak again." This truth cannot be rushed. When the call ended, Tom realized his hands were shaking so much he could barely put the phone down. Whatever was coming, it was going to hurt. The next morning felt colder than usual, even under the California sun. Tom skipped breakfast, his mind consumed with questions. Why had his father never told him about this? Why now, after all these years, was a president halfway across the world bringing it up? At exactly 9 a.m., the phone rang again. Tom Traoré's voice was calm but heavy. Your father gave away his only way back to America. The ticket he had saved for months? He stayed in our village when he could have left, because leaving would have meant leaving us to die. Tom's eyes burned. He stayed. Yes, he stayed until the rains came back, and when sickness spread through the camp, he gave his medicine to a little boy who wasn't even related to him. He didn't survive the fever himself. Tom's mouth went dry. You're telling me my father died there? Traoré's silence was confirmation. Enough. Tom's heart thudded painfully. All these years he'd believed his father died somewhere in America, but the truth was far from what he'd ever imagined. Tom couldn't speak. The room spun as if the walls were closing in. His father, the man he'd thought abandoned him emotionally, had died saving strangers. Traoré's voice softened. When he passed, the villagers buried him under a tree. In his shirt pocket was a photograph of a boy smiling on a swing. We believe that boy was you. Tom felt tears streaming down his face. He remembered that day. He was 6. His mother had taken the picture after pushing him on a rusty swing at a park. Traoré continued. The picture has been kept safe for decades. I still have it in my possession. And Tom, there's more to the story. Something I believe your father wanted you to know. It's why I've carried this photograph since the day I first learned about you. Tom wiped his face, his voice breaking. Tell me. Not yet, Traoré replied gently. The rest must be told in person. I want you to come to Ouagadougou. Tom knew then this week was going to change him forever. Tom sat in his car outside the studio gates, his phone still in his hand. The world around him was normal. Traffic honking, people rushing, but inside, everything felt different. A trip to Ouagadougou wasn't in his plans. He had meetings, film schedules, commitments, but something in Traoré's voice, the weight of it, made saying no impossible. He called his assistant. Clear my week, no questions. That night, he booked the first available flight. The journey would take over 20 hours, but his mind was already there. What else had his father done? What could be so important that a head of state would hold on to it for decades? Tom didn't tell anyone the real reason for his trip. Some things were too personal, too raw. Before sleeping, he looked at an old photo of himself on that swing. The same one Traoré claimed to have. His father's absence had always been a wound, but now that wound felt like it was about to be opened wider than ever before. The next day, Tom boarded the plane. First class, yet comfort meant nothing to him now. Outside, the city of Los Angeles shrank beneath the clouds, but his thoughts only grew heavier. During the long flight, he replayed every childhood memory of his father. There weren't many: short visits, hurried talks, long silences. And yet, according to Traoré, his father had been a man who gave his life for others. Why had he never shown that side to his own son? At one point, Tom closed his eyes and imagined his father in that village, dusty roads, scorching sun, helping strangers. With bare hands, he imagined him coughing from fever, yet smiling at a child. The image brought an ache to his chest. When the plane began descending over West Africa, the landscape below felt like another world. Earthy tones, scattered green patches, and winding rivers. Tom's heart pounded. He wasn't here for a film. He was here for answers. Ouagadougou's air was warm and dry, carrying scents unfamiliar to Tom. The airport wasn't grand, but the atmosphere felt alive. Voices calling, children laughing, vendors selling roasted corn. Waiting at the exit was a black SUV and a man in a neat suit. Mr. Cruz, welcome. The president is expecting you, the man said in perfect English. As they drove through the city, Tom watched the streets, women balancing baskets, boys playing soccer, barefoot, motorcycles weaving through traffic. It felt both foreign and strangely welcoming. They passed a market where colorful fabrics fluttered in the breeze. For a brief moment, Tom thought he saw a boy's face in the crowd. Bright eyes, wide smile, the same expression from his childhood photograph. He blinked, and the boy was gone. Finally, the SUV pulled up to a modest but dignified presidential residence. Inside, Captain Ibrahim Traoré was waiting. He greeted Tom not with the formal stiffness of a leader, but with the warmth of an old friend. "Welcome to Burkina Faso, Tom," he said. "I believe you're ready to see what your father left behind." Tom felt his chest tighten. This was it, the meeting. Room was quiet, the kind of silence that demanded attention. Trough rose from his seat and extended his hand. His grip was firm, but his eyes, they carried a depth Tom couldn't ignore. "Thank you for coming all this way," the president began. "This is not a political matter. It is something far more personal." They sat across from each other at a polished wooden table. A folder lay between them. Traoré placed his hand on it, but didn't open it yet. "Your father's time in my country is remembered by people who were just children then. They tell stories of a man who refused to leave when things became dangerous. But I believe there is something you need to see for yourself." Tom's eyes drifted to the folder. He wanted to snatch it open, but he forced himself to wait. Traoré studied him for a moment, then said quietly, "Before I show you this, I must take you to the place where your father's last days were spent. Only then will the truth make sense." Tom's throat tightened. He nodded. Early the next morning they set out in a convoy of 2 vehicles. The city faded into open fields, then into dry red earth stretching for miles. Tom watched children waving at the cars, goats wandering by the roadside, women carrying water jars on their heads. It was humbling, a world far from the flashing cameras, he knew. As they drove, Traoré spoke softly. "Your father. He could have gone home when the drought worsened, but he stayed. He taught farmers new ways to grow food. He worked alongside them under the sun with no thought of reward. The road became rough, the ride bumpy." Tom held on to the seat as dust swirled around them. In the distance, small mud brick houses appeared, surrounded by mango trees. "This is it," Traoré said as the vehicle stopped. "The village where your father spent his last breath." Tom stepped out. The air was still, heavy with heat. A group of elders stood waiting, their eyes warm, curious. He felt something stirred deep inside. A strange pull, as if the ground itself held pieces of his father's story. They walked through the village, children following behind with shy smiles. An old man led them to the edge where a large lime tree stood tall and wide. Its shade offered relief from the sun. Traoré stopped and pointed. "This is where your father is buried." Tom's heart pounded. He stared at the mound of earth under the tree. A simple wooden cross stood at its head, weathered by decades. There was no marble, no gold, only humility and peace. One of the elders stepped forward, speaking in a local dialect. Traoré translated. He says, "Your father was not just a visitor, he became family. He gave his last medicine to save a child. That child is now a leader in this community." Tom's vision blurred with tears. He knelt, running his hand over the dusty soil. He tried to imagine his father here, tired, perhaps sick, but still giving everything he had. Traoré's voice was gentle. "There is something else. Your father left a letter for you. It has been kept all these years." Tom looked up sharply, his voice cracked. "Where is it?" Traoré simply said, "Tomorrow." That night, Tom stayed in a small guest room near the presidential residence. The air was warm, the sounds of crickets outside, constant, but sleep refused to come. He kept thinking about that mound of earth under the neem tree. His father, a man he had misunderstood his whole life, had died there, and tomorrow he would finally read the letter his father had left him decades ago. Tom wondered what it would say, an apology, an explanation, or perhaps nothing that could heal the years of silence between them. At one point, he stood by the window looking out into the darkness. Somewhere in this country, people still remembered his father. They didn't see him as absent or distant. They saw him as a hero. When dawn finally came, Tom was exhausted, but there was a strange sense of peace in his chest. Today, he would face the truth. Traoré greeted him early that morning. In his hand, he held a small, weathered envelope. The edges were frayed, the paper yellowed with age. "This," Traoré said softly, "was given to me by the village elder when I first learned about your father. He asked me to keep it safe until the day I could give it to you." Tom's fingers shook as he took the envelope. On the front, in faded ink, was his name, Thomas. He hesitated before breaking the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper folded neatly. The handwriting was messy, but strong. "My son, if you're reading this, it means I could not make it home." Tom's eyes blurred instantly. His father's voice seemed to speak through every word. The letter told of the drought, the hunger, the sickness, and the choice he made to stay. But as Tom reached the end, one sentence made his hands go cold. There is something here, something I have left for you that will tell you who I truly am. Tom looked up from the letter, his voice trembling. What did he mean? What did he leave? Traoré smiled faintly. Follow me. They drove for an hour, leaving the city behind, until they reached a quiet hill overlooking fields of gold. At the top stood a small building made of clay and wood. Inside, the air was cool. Against one wall was a wooden chest, old but polished with care. Traoré knelt, opening it slowly. Inside were worn clothes, a pair of work boots, a rusted water flask, and in the center, a small wooden box. This box, Traoré said, was his most guarded possession. He told the villagers it was meant for you. Tom lifted it carefully. The wood was smooth, carved with strange patterns. His heart pounded as he ran his hand over the lid. Traoré placed a hand on his shoulder. Before you open it, know that what's inside may change the way you see everything. Not just your father, but yourself. Tom swallowed hard. His fingers found the latch. The lid creaked open. The box was small but heavy. Tom lifted the lid slowly, his breath shallow. Inside lay 3 items: a folded piece of fabric, worn but clean in the bright colors of Burkina Faso, a silver watch with a cracked glass face, and a small notebook, the pages yellowed with age. Tom picked up the watch first. It was his father's. He remembered seeing it on his wrist when he was a boy. The hands had stopped at 417. Next, he opened the notebook. The writing was shaky in some places, but the words were alive. It wasn't just a journal. It was a record of every name, every life his father had touched in that village. Pages filled with memories, small acts of kindness, promises made and kept. Near the back, one final entry read, "If my son finds this, know that I stayed because love is bigger than distance. And you, Tom, were the reason I kept fighting to make the world better, even far from home." Tom's vision blurred completely. Later that afternoon, Traoré took Tom back to the neem tree. The elders gathered again, children sitting cross-legged in the dust, watching quietly as Tom knelt by the grave, holding the notebook in one hand and the watch in the other. "I never understood you," he whispered, his voice breaking, "but I do now, and I'm proud. So proud." A breeze rustled the leaves above, almost as if the tree itself was listening. One of the elders stepped forward and placed a hand on Tom's shoulder, speaking softly. Traoré translated, he says, "Your father is at peace now because you have come." Tom closed his eyes, letting the weight of those words sink deep into his heart. When he stood, he turned to Traoré. "Thank you for keeping this safe, for telling me the truth." Traoré smiled gently. It was never a burden. It was an honor. As the sun began to set, the golden light washed over the village. For the first time in years, Tom felt something lift from his chest. The next morning, Tom boarded his flight back to Los Angeles, the box carefully stored in his carry-on. He kept the watch in his pocket, touching it now and then as if to make sure it was still real. Looking out the plane window, the fields and villages grew smaller beneath him, but the feeling in his chest grew larger. He carried more than a box home. He carried his father's legacy. When the plane landed, reporters were waiting, but Tom said little. Some things were not for headlines. That night, alone in his home, he placed the notebook on his desk and opened.